Episode number 18. Kay was interrupted by a screeching from the far end of the hall. He shaded his eyes to see that far, as the dull light of day made the smoke whitish, and hard to see through. It was the washerwoman whom Kay had recognized as a likely source of disturbance as soon as she had entered. It was hard to see now whether it was her fault or not. Kay could only see that the man had pulled her into a corner by the door, and was pressing himself against her. But it was not her who was screaming, but the man. He had opened his mouth wide, and looked up at the ceiling. A small circle had formed around the two of them. The visitors near him in the gala seemed delighted that the serious tone Kay had introduced into the gathering had been disturbed in this way. K's first thought was to run over there, and he also thought that everyone would want to bring things back into order there, or at least to make the pair leave the room. But the first row of people in front of him stayed where they were. No one moved, and no one let Kay through. On the contrary, they stood in his way. Old men held out their arms in front of him, and a hand from somewhere, he did not have the time to turn round, took hold of his collar. Kay, by this time, had forgotten about the pair. It seemed to him that his freedom was being limited as if his arrest was being taken seriously, and, without a thought for what he was doing, he jumped down from the podium. Now he stood face to face with the crowd. Had he judged the people properly? Had he put too much faith in the effect of his speech? Had they been putting up a pretense all the time he had been speaking, and now that he come to the end, and to what must follow, were they tired of pretending? What faces they were, all around him. Dark, little eyes flickered here and there, cheeks stooped down like on drunken men, their long beards were thin and stiff. If they took hold of them it was more like they were making their hands into claws, not as if they were taking hold of their own beards. But underneath those beards, and this was the real discovery made by Kay, there were badges of various sizes and colors shining on the collars of their coats. As far as he could see, every one of them was wearing one of these badges. All of them belonged to the same group, even though they seemed to divided to the right and the left of him. And when he suddenly turned round he saw the same badge on the collar of the examining judge, who calmly looked down at him with his hands in his lap. "So?" called out Kay, throwing his arms in there as if this sudden realization needed more room. "All of you are working for this organization. I see now that you are all the very bunch of cheats and liars I've just been speaking about. You've all pressed yourselves in here in order to listen in and snoop on me. You gave the impression of having formed into factions. One of you even applauded me to test me out, and you wanted to learn how to trap an innocent man. Well, I hope you haven't come here for nothing. I hope you've either had some fun from someone who expected you to defend his innocence, or else, let go of me, or I'll hit you," shouted Kay to a quivery old man, who had pressed himself especially close to him, "or else that you've actually learned something. And so I wish you good luck in your trade." He briskly took his hat from where it lay on the edge of the table and, surrounded by a silence caused perhaps by the completeness of the surprise, pushed his way to the exit. However, the examining judge seems to have moved even more quickly than Kay, as he was waiting for him at the doorway. "One moment," he said. Kay stood where he was, but looked at the door with his hand already on its handle other than at the judge. "I merely wanted to draw your attention," said the judge, "to something you seem not yet to be aware of. Today, you have robbed yourself of the advantages that a hearing of this sort always gives to someone who is under arrest." Kay laughed towards the door. "You bunch of louts," he called. "You can keep all your hearings as a present from me," then opened the door and hurried down the steps. Behind him, the noise of the assembly rose as it became lively once more and probably began to discuss these events as if making a scientific study of them.